I'm Andrew Gray. I'm the content design lead at ArenaNet, working on Guild Wars 2. And most recently, I was working on bringing back the Marionette from 2014.
I'm glad you mentioned the Marionette. I'm going to put a pin in that one for a second because I will be asking about that. But first, I want to start off with the Living World. You recently wrapped up the Icebrood saga. It may not be easy to dance around spoilers because there are people that still haven't played that last chapter, but right. I'm going to go ahead and attempt to ask the question anyway. So where is the Guild Wars 2 Living World storyline right now heading into the big expansion? Like, what's the current state of Tyria?
Oh man, this is tough because I really don't want to spoil for people. It was definitely left with a lot of mystery. There were a lot of assumptions on what would happen that didn't necessarily happen, and a lot of, as Taimi and Gorik said, we have research to do at the end of it because they don't know, and for scientists that is concerning for them because they like to be in the know of things. So it's definitely left in a mysterious space, let's just say.
One of the things that I really liked about that last chapter of the Icebrood saga is you have this giant clash between these massive dragons, and this is something that you guys teased like way back before the game even first came out, was we're gonna have dragons and they get huge. So what was your approach to designing that climactic fight between Primordus and Jormog?
So that one in particular was very interesting. There was a lot of narrative weight around that fight. Like we had already established a lot of things. Like we knew Norn was part of a prophecy that stated that he would be that either he would kill Jormag or he would be killed. And then we knew that the two dragons were they were each other's weaknesses. So that in some capacity, the two of them would have to ultimately either clash or somehow use their magic pitted against each other for them to be defeated. Having to sort of thread that line where all of those things are true was really interesting. The fight itself was grounded around the champions of the three dragons, you being one of them, but mainly the Ryland and Bram became the two champions of the two respective dragons. So that was a great way for us to sort of weave the Bram and the Jormag and Primordus all together into one big climactic fight.
So you're giving players the opportunity to replay episodes of the Living World over the past few weeks and over the next few weeks. So taking a step back, it's the funniest thing to look back at some of your old work and wonder, like, look at how much you've grown. So let's take a step back. How do you compare those first few seasons, and how do you feel they compare to what you've put together for the Icebrood saga?
Well, we've definitely changed a lot of how the Living World format is released over the time or over the years. Going back and replaying season 2 has been super fun. Meeting a lot of those characters for the first time is a great experience. For Icebrood Saga, we experimented with a lot of new formats, strike missions, dragon response missions. We wanted to find a way, for dragon response missions specifically, we wanted to find a way to make this battle between the dragons feel like a worldwide battle. Because a lot of times those final battles end up being in an isolated map, and so it can kind of feel small scale. And we wanted to really illustrate the fact that Jormag and Primordus are rampaging around the world. So you're fighting them, you're defending the Savari homeland, you're defending the Tengu for a change, So that was one big change, I'd say, with Icebrood Saga, is we really wanted to give it the sense that it had a global scale by repurposing a lot of our existing maps and going back and revisiting them and seeing how the impact of this global conflict is having on all the citizens of the world.
What are the challenges in increasing your scope to such a global scale?
Well, we had to be clever about it, honestly. If we had, said, like, we're going to make full new maps for every single one of these battle zones, it wouldn't have worked out very well. And honestly, it wouldn't have been as good, because going back and revisiting some of those places that, like, hey, I remember traveling around here when I was level 10, and now you see it on fire because Primordus is launching meteors from the sky at it and all this sort of stuff. It has a more emotional impact on you than if we just, introduce new maps. So it was sort of a win-win situation where we were able to go back and use some of the original play space in new creative ways, not just because, that makes it so the scope is manageable, but also because like that makes it have more weight. Like you see civilians that you met when you were an up and coming adventurer fleeing for their life from dragon minions. That's impactful. You're defending your home. Like this is like your home instance is right through those walls. You know, that sort of idea.
Now that we're on the topic of like a bit on the topic of older content, I guess it's time to start talking about the Twisted Marionette encounter, which it's coming back in July. So if you're a new player, what can you expect to see from this? And if you're a longtime Guild Wars 2 player who remembers the Twisted Marionette, what changes can they expect to see?
I can start with changes. Honestly, this piece of content was a lot of fun when we initially launched it, and as I started working on it again, like it's like a really solid encounter. Like it's super fun. So it didn't require like a whole ground up rework or anything like that. There were definitely some mechanical changes to the game that have happened since 2014. Obviously, like break bars didn't exist back then, so we worked together to find interesting ways to incorporate break bars, like the Defiance mechanic, into the fight. Also, listen to some of the feedback from the original time we launched it, because we launched it. It went away, and then we haven't launched it since then, so we never really had the opportunity to react to a lot of the feedback from the original fight. But like one of the big changes that we made was, as you're going through the encounter, you're sort of defending lanes, and periodically one of the lanes is sent in to go fight on these platforms against these boss creatures, and there's 5 individual platforms. So the group of, if you have say 10 people in the lane, you're getting split up to like groups of 2. It's actually a pretty tense fight, because like you're kind of used to, at least in open world fights, you're kind of used to being able to rely on critical mass. Like there's always somebody there to pick me up when I'm down, right? And if there's only 2 or 3 of you fighting on these platforms, it puts a lot more individual pressure on you. And you know, like if 4 out of 5 of those groups succeed and then the 5th one is struggling, one of the big pieces of feedback we had in the original was like, man, it would be great if we could do something to help those other players on those other platforms so they had a chance to succeed. And people actually joked like, I wish if I /cheered it would give them a boost. So we actually, special action skills were something that we added, I believe, post Heart of Thorns. That's just like basically an extra skill that pops up periodically. It's a more of a situational thing. So we added a mechanic to where if you are one of the earlier groups in who succeeds on your platform, you get a special action skill that pops up that literally plays the cheer emote. You're rooting on your other friends and gives them boons, gives them a bit of healing, and helps rally downed players and stuff like that. So it makes it feel like there's less of a downtime for those people who are like the first to complete. And you can have those moments where it's like, oh no, they're not going to make it, and then somebody helps them rally, and people really like that change. As far as things to look for, one thing I will say is look up. Look at the Marionette. Look at all the cool things the Marionette does. It's a very fast-paced fight. Like on one hand, you're like, it's a heavily lane defense theme thing, and then you're going up on the platform and it's like, oh god, there's only 3 of us fighting this champion. Like it's a pretty tense fight, but I have to say, take the time to look over at all the crazy things the Marionette does. Because like even as I was working on it, I was like, I didn't remember that at some point her head literally spins around and spits stuff and everything. Granted, it's been 7 years, so I might have just forgotten that, but all the little details of that model are phenomenal.
Is that going to inspire like content later down the line, now that you're looking at the Marionette and going, wow, I didn't remember we did this. This was super cool. Like we should do something like this again.
To be fair, I don't think we ever moved away from that. Our art team is amazing. They are always doing cool stuff like that. I think this was just one case that, for the most time, when you're fighting a world boss or a boss in general, you are focused directly on the boss. Where in this case, you are fighting ads or regulators. You're interacting with the boss a little less directly. So it was just easier to miss that stuff. If anything, I would say one of the lessons that we could learn from that is make sure you're doing things to draw the focal point to the big boss that's doing cool stuff more often.
So there's a lot that's coming to Guild Wars 2, and a lot of it we don't know about, a lot of it we're not going to know about for a while. But there is something that's coming in the next week, and that's the Dragon Bash. So what can players expect from the annual Dragon Bash this year?
So we did a big revamp of Dragon Bash. I want to say it was last year. So we didn't do a ton with it this year, but we did do some balance changes to the open world content. There's some new rewards. We actually play tested that on Friday, and it was super fun. There were some scaling issues that were fixed, basically, to make it easier for you to split up and actually complete all of the Stampede events. Those most of the changes for that.
I know the team has had a bit of a rocky 2020, largely because of the pandemic. A lot of people were impacted by the pandemic. You couldn't get a lot of the voice acting and animated cutscenes into some of the Ice Brood episodes right away, like took a little bit of extra time. What are some of the big ways that COVID impacted Guild Wars 2's development? And do you feel like production is getting back to where it was pre-COVID?
Yeah, I definitely, there were some growing pains there for sure. I'd say the communication is the biggest thing. Like when you're able to just like turn around and talk to somebody, or like happen to hear two other people talk about things, like that is pertinent to my interest, I should jump into this conversation. Like it helps keep communication just constantly flowing, almost just passively. Whereas when you're working from home, everybody has to be very proactive about making sure they're communicating everything they're doing, making sure that they're seeking out the information they need from others. So it definitely took some getting used to. That said, like I definitely feel like we've gotten used to it. Like in a lot of cases, I feel like, man, these meetings are more productive using voice than they would have been if we were all cramming people in a room. So like I honestly feel like there's some things that have improved from it. For one, like communication has improved from it out of necessity. It's not good to rely on somebody happening to overhear those things. You really should be messaging those things out and communicating to your peers. So if there's one positive takeaway is I think that we're honestly going to be stronger developers for this. Stronger developers, stronger communicators, better team members to each other, just because of the having to adapt.
Is this a bit of a new normal for you, at least for you guys, in terms of working as a studio? Or now that the COVID numbers are starting to come down, is it going to go back to the old office lifestyle?
I'm not sure. Like it's an ongoing conversation. I know a lot of studios are going with a hybrid approach, and that's certainly something we've talked about. I don't know that, like I said, there are a lot of things you lose out on than having no face-to-face time. So I don't know that I could see us ever going full-blown work from home, but some sort of hybrid might work.
Back in May, you released a big balance patch, and this one hit a lot of the professions. It hit a lot of aspects of the game. What did you specifically target with the balance patch? And is there anything you're seeing now that you kind of still feel like needs to be addressed?
So I don't want to misspeak for another team because I am not on the skills and balance team. So I don't want to go into a ton of details on that, but I can say that as a studio, we're trying to be exceptionally player focused. We're trying to look at player needs first and foremost when we make our decisions. So I'm sorry, that's a very wishy-washy answer, but it's just I don't want to go into details that I'm not super up on.
You have a really passionate community on the Guild Wars 2 subreddit, and I'm actually wondering how much inspiration has the team taken from that feedback that they see on the subreddit?
So we gather feedback from a lot of places. Reddit is one of them. Our own forums obviously is one of them. We do player surveys. We pull analytics. Like we try to get. There's no such thing as too much data, honestly. So we try to get that from as many places. We also have a very dedicated and passionate test group, and like it's a lot of our staff members also play the game. So like most of our staff members play the game, certainly our designers. So like we have our own experiences in the game as well to go off of. So Reddit is definitely a part of that. It's not the only part, but it's an important part. Like, and we do listen to them for sure.
And one thing I picked up in researching the subreddit is there seems to be a consensus that they love Guild Wars 2 for how streamlined it is. And I want to ask, in your opinion, just as the content creator or as a player, like, how do you feel that Guild Wars 2 is more accessible and like more streamlined than its competitors?
I think Guild Wars 2 is great because it has layers of depth. You can log in Guild Wars 2 and play pretty casually and just run around in open world events, and you're still gonna have a great time. But if you want to dig into the most current meta and go into hardcore challenge modes of fractals or raids, like that depth exists in the game. I think some other MMOs like that depth is mostly it. Like, unless you're going to get hardcore into raiding in a certain MMO, like there's not as much for you in that game. It's basically you do that or you don't play. Guild Wars 2 is like there's kind of something for everyone in there, honestly. I know people who log in and just run around and almost play the pacifist road or pacifist role because they just love exploring the world, and they're less into just like straight, combat, and they just want to go around and, dress up their character awesome and take great screenshots all around the world, and they could do that as well. I love the Guild Wars franchise. I love Guild Wars 2. It's one of those games that like I start playing, and the next thing you know, 6 hours later.
Lastly, for me, you've got a big event lined up on July the 27th. It's a first look at Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons. I know you can't reveal any major details. You can't reveal any minor details. Everything is really being kept close to the chest. But I have to try anyway. For our Guild Wars 2 players on our website, for our Shacknews Guild, is there one thing that players should be on the lookout for during this stream?
Well, the only thing I can say is Cantha confirmed.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate that. And we look forward to it. Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons. We don't know when it's coming out, but there's a stream coming on July the 27th.